I never imagined that the boy I raised with my own hands would one day tell me that I was not welcome at his wedding. Not distant relatives. Not people he barely knew. Me. And my wife. The same two people who built his life from nothing. And that was only the beginning. Because just 1 week later, he threw us out of our own home. A house I paid for. A house I repaired with my own hands. A house that held every memory of our family. Let me tell you how it all started. My name is Frank Donovan. I'm 64 years old. For most of my life, I believed one simple thing. If you give your children everything you have, they will never turn their backs on you. I was wrong. If you're new here, subscribe to this channel. And before we go any further, comment below with your city or country. I want to know where you're listening from. And tell me honestly, have you ever been hurt by someone you trusted with your whole heart? Because this story, it's not just mine. My wife and I raised our son the old-fashioned way. No shortcuts. No excuses. I worked long hours. Sometimes 2 jobs. Sometimes night shifts that left my back aching and my hands numb. Every dollar I earned went into that house. Every sacrifice was for him. While other families went on vacations, we stayed home. While others upgraded cars, we repaired the old one again and again. Because college was coming. Because his future mattered more than our comfort. That house wasn't just brick and wood. It was proof of our love. I still remember the day we bought it. The walls were cracked. The roof leaked. The neighborhood wasn't perfect. But I stood there with my wife and said, "This will be his home. This will be where he grows up safe." And it was. We watched him take his first steps in that living room. We helped him with homework at that kitchen table. We sat up late waiting when he was out with friends, pretending we weren't worried. When he failed his first exam, I told him failure didn't define him. When he broke his arm playing football, I carried him to the car myself. When he said he wanted to start his own business one day, I smiled and told him I believed in him. And I meant it. As the years passed, we never asked him for anything. Not money. Not gratitude. Not even recognition. All we wanted was respect. When he got his first real job, we were proud. When he brought his girlfriend home for the first time, we welcomed her. We treated her like family. Invited her to dinner. Included her in holidays. I thought everything was fine. But looking back now, the signs were there. Small changes at first. Shorter phone calls. Less eye contact. Long pauses before answering simple questions. When we asked about wedding plans, he would say, "Don't worry about it. We've got it handled." Handled. That word stayed with me. Then one evening, he sat us down in the living room. The same living room where he once played with toy cars on the floor. He didn't look nervous. He didn't look guilty. He looked distant. He cleared his throat and said, "Mom, Dad, we've decided to keep the wedding very small." My wife smiled and said, "That's fine. Whatever makes you happy." Then he said the words that still echo in my head. "You won't be attending." At first, I thought I misheard him. I laughed lightly and said, "What do you mean?" He looked straight at me and replied, "It's better this way. Less drama." Drama. We had never raised our voices at him. Never interfered in his relationship. Never embarrassed him. My wife's hands started shaking. She asked softly, "Are we not invited?" He nodded. No apology. No explanation. Just a decision. I felt something break inside my chest. Not anger. Not rage. Shock. I asked him why. He said, "This is my life now. I need space." Space. From the people who gave him everything. That night, my wife cried herself to sleep. I sat in the dark, staring at the ceiling, trying to understand how we got here. But the worst part hadn't come yet. A few days later, he came home with papers. Legal papers. He told us he had spoken to a lawyer. He said the house needed to be reorganized. He said since he had been paying some bills recently, it made sense for the house to be transferred. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was unbelievable. I told him the house was in my name. Paid in full. Always had been. He didn't argue. He just said, "We'll see." That's when I realized. This wasn't about independence. This was about control. Within a week, things escalated faster than I could comprehend. We received a notice. A formal notice. He was demanding we vacate the house. Our house. The place where he grew up. The place where every photo, every memory lived. My wife kept asking, "Is this real? Can he really do this?" I didn't have an answer. I had spent my life working with my hands. I trusted people. I trusted family. I never thought I would need a lawyer to protect myself from my own son. But that's exactly where we were headed. The night before the deadline, I walked through every room of the house. I touched the walls. I looked at old photos. And for the first time in my life, I felt truly disposable. Like my purpose had ended. The moment he no longer needed me. What I didn't know then was that this betrayal was about to turn into something much bigger. Something that would drag us into court. Something that would expose truths he never expected to come out. And something that would change all of our lives forever. The deadline came faster than I expected. 7 days. That's all the time my own son gave us to erase an entire lifetime. The notice sat on the kitchen table, right next to the place where my wife used to leave notes for him. "Dinner is in the oven. Don't forget your jacket. Love you." Now there was only silence. My wife kept walking from room to room, packing and unpacking the same box, as if doing it slowly might somehow stop what was happening. I tried to stay calm. I told myself this had to be a mistake, that he would come to his senses. But every time my phone buzzed, it wasn't him. It was his lawyer. Formal. Cold. Precise. No emotion. No history. Just instructions. Vacate the premises. Failure to comply. Legal consequences. Those words don't belong in a family. I finally called my son. He answered on the third ring. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse him. I simply asked, "Why are you doing this?" There was a pause. Then he said something I will never forget. "Dad, you had your time. This is my turn now." My time. As if raising him had been some selfish phase of my life. I told him the house was legally mine. That he had no right. He replied calmly, "Let the court decide." And then he hung up. That's when I knew. This was no misunderstanding. This was a plan. That night, my wife finally broke down. Not loud crying. Not screaming. Just quiet tears that soaked into my shoulder. As she whispered, "Where did we go wrong?" I had no answer. But I knew one thing. We were not leaving that house quietly. The next morning, I did something I never thought I would do. I searched for a lawyer. Walking into that office felt humiliating, like admitting failure. The lawyer was a woman in her early 50s. Sharp eyes. Calm voice. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned back and said, "Frank, your son is counting on fear and silence." She asked one simple question. "Whose name is on the deed?" I told her the truth. "Mine. And my wife's." She nodded. Then she asked, "Did you ever sign anything transferring ownership?" I shook my head. She smiled slightly and said, "Then he doesn't own the house." That was the first breath of relief. I had taken in days. But she wasn't done. She explained something even more disturbing. My son wasn't just trying to remove us. He was trying to pressure us into giving up the house voluntarily. He assumed we would be too embarrassed, too afraid, too heartbroken to fight back. He assumed wrong. The lawyer told us to prepare documents, bank records, old tax papers, proof. While we were gathering evidence, my son escalated. He stopped speaking to us entirely. He changed the locks on the back door. He shut off utilities. In his name. Every move calculated. To make us uncomfortable. To make us leave. Neighbors started noticing. One afternoon, a woman across the street asked my wife, "Are you moving?" My wife forced a smile and said, "Not by choice." Word spread quickly. And with it came judgment. Some people assumed we must have done something terrible. Because surely no son would do this without reason. That hurt almost as much as his actions. Then came the wedding photos. Not from him. From social media. A small ceremony. Elegant. Carefully staged. Him smiling. Laughing. Standing at the altar. Without us. I stared at those pictures. Longer than I should have. I wasn't angry. I felt erased. Like we had never existed. My wife couldn't look at them. She said it felt like attending our own funeral. Without being invited. A week later, the official court notice arrived. He was suing us. Claiming emotional distress. Claiming financial contribution. Claiming entitlement. The audacity of it left me speechless. This wasn't about misunderstanding anymore. This was war. Our lawyer filed a response. She requested an injunction to stop any eviction attempt. The court date was set. That waiting period was the longest of my life. Every sound in the house felt temporary. Every meal felt like it could be the last. We ate there. My wife started apologizing for things from decades ago. Small arguments. Forgotten moments. As if any of that justified what was happening. I kept telling her, "This is not your fault." But guilt has a way of settling deep in the heart. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I walked into my son's old bedroom. Everything was gone. No posters. No trophies. Just empty walls. That room used to be full of dreams. Now it felt like evidence. The courtroom was quiet. When we arrived, my son was already there. He didn't look at us. Not once. His wife sat beside him, holding his hand. She didn't look at us either. Our lawyer whispered, "Stay calm. Let him speak." When his lawyer began, I felt physically sick. They painted us as controlling, manipulative, obstacles. They said we refused to let go, that we were holding him back. I wanted to stand up and scream, but I didn't. Because then our lawyer stood. She spoke calmly, clearly. She presented documents dating back 30 years. Mortgage payments, tax records, utility bills. All in my name. Then she did something unexpected. She asked the judge to hear recorded messages. Voicemails from my son. Messages where he threatened, where he pressured, where he demanded. The courtroom changed. I saw it on the judge's face. The mask slipped. My son shifted in his seat. For the first time. He looked nervous. The judge requested a recess. As we stepped outside, my son finally looked at me. Not with anger. With fear. He whispered, "This wasn't supposed to go like this." I looked at him and said nothing. Because at that moment, I realized something powerful. He thought we were weak. He thought love meant surrender. But he had underestimated How far a parent would go to protect what they built, and what was coming next would shock him more than anything we had done before. The judge returned to the courtroom with a look that made my stomach tighten. He didn't sit down right away. He looked directly at my son, then at me, then at my wife, and then he spoke. "This case," he said slowly, "is not as simple as it was presented." My son's lawyer straightened in his chair. The judge continued, "There are serious concerns about coercion, intimidation, and misuse of legal process." My heart started pounding. The judge asked my son one direct question. "Did you pressure your parents to vacate the home, despite knowing the deed was not in your name?" My son hesitated. Just for a second. But in that courtroom, 1 second is an eternity. His lawyer tried to intervene. "Your Honor!" The judge raised his hand. I asked him. My son swallowed. He said, "I only wanted what was fair." The judge leaned forward. "Fair," he repeated. "To whom?" Silence. Then our lawyer stood again. She calmly walked the court. Through the timeline. The wedding exclusion. The sudden legal notices. The utility shutoffs. The lock changes. Each action wasn't random. It was a strategy. Pressure layered on pressure. She explained how elder intimidation works. How emotional leverage is used to force voluntary surrender. I saw heads nodding in the courtroom, including the judges. My son's confidence was fading fast. Then the judge did something unexpected. He ordered my son to testify. Not later. Now. My son stood up. For the first time. He looked small. The questions came quickly. "Did your parents ever threaten you?" "No." "Did they ever demand money from you?" "No." "Did they interfere in your marriage?" "No." The judge paused. "Then why were they excluded from your wedding?" My son opened his mouth, closed it, then said, "It was a personal choice." The judge didn't let it go. "Personal choices," he said, "do not justify legal harassment." That word landed hard. Harassment. The room felt heavier. Then came the moment I will never forget. The judge turned to me. "Mr. Donovan," he said, "how long did you own this house? Before your son claimed it?" I answered truthfully. 32 years, Your Honor." "And how long has your son lived there? As an adult contributing financially?" I didn't exaggerate. "About 3 years. Partial bills. No ownership." The judge nodded. He wrote something down. Then he looked back at my son. "You attempted to remove the legal owners of a property without lawful authority." My son's lawyer whispered urgently to him. I could see panic now. The judge wasn't finished. He issued an immediate ruling. A temporary one, but powerful. My son was prohibited from interfering with our residence. No more notices. No more shutoffs. No intimidation. Violation would carry penalties. The gavel came down. And just like that, the balance shifted. Outside the courtroom, reporters weren't there, but eyes were. Other families. Other lawyers. Word travels fast. When something like this happens, my son finally approached us. His face was pale. "This is getting out of hand," he said. I looked at him. For years, I had softened my voice for him, protected him, absorbed disappointment silently. "Not this time," I said calmly. "You did this." He shook his head. "You're ruining my life." I didn't raise my voice. I replied. "You tried to erase ours." That was the moment. Something broke between us permanently. But the case wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. Our lawyer warned us. "This ruling protects you for now. But the next phase will determine everything." discovery, financial audits, communication records. My son had opened a door he could no longer close. As documents were exchanged, the truth started leaking out. He had taken loans, using the house address. He had implied ownership on applications. He had planned to sell, not immediately, quietly. After forcing us out, the betrayal ran deeper than we ever imagined. When our lawyer showed us the paperwork, my wife covered her mouth. He planned this, she whispered. Yes, he had. And worse. His wife knew. She had encouraged it. Messages confirmed it. They spoke about us like obstacles, not parents. Obstacles. The next court date was no longer about eviction. It was about fraud, misrepresentation, abuse of process. My son's demeanor changed completely. Gone was the confidence. Now he avoided eye contact. His lawyer became defensive. Meanwhile, something strange happened. Family members started calling us. People who hadn't spoken to us in years. They had heard rumors. But now they were seeing documents, screenshots, court filings. The narrative was changing. The story my son told was unraveling. One evening, a knock came at the door. It was my son's wife's parents. They stood awkwardly on the porch. They apologized. Not for everything, but enough. They admitted. They didn't know the full story. They admitted. They were shocked. The shame on my son's face that night was something I never thought I would see. But it didn't stop there. At the next hearing, the judge reviewed the evidence. He asked pointed questions about intent, about deception, about exploitation. Then he said something that sent a chill through the room. This court does not look kindly on those who weaponize family for personal gain. He scheduled a full trial, and he ordered a financial review of my son's actions. That order changed everything. Because once finances are exposed, lies don't survive. The stress began to crack him. Friends distanced themselves. Work colleagues whispered. His perfect image was cracking publicly. And through it all, my wife and I stayed in our home. Still cooking in the same kitchen. Still sleeping in the same bedroom. But now with a strange clarity. We were no longer afraid. We were fighting back. Not with anger. With truth. And the truth, once unleashed, was about to cost my son far more than he ever imagined. Because what the court would uncover next would not just decide the house. It would decide who really betrayed whom. The financial review didn't take long. Once the court ordered it, everything moved fast. Too fast for my son to control. Banks responded. Employers responded. Records surfaced. Numbers don't lie. And neither do signatures. Our lawyer called us into her office. 3 days later, she spread documents across the table. Loan applications, business filings, email confirmations. My son had listed the house as a future transferable asset. Not owned. Not gifted. Planned. He had leveraged our address to secure credit. Large amounts. Without our knowledge. Without our consent. My wife stared at the papers as if they were written in a foreign language. He was planning to sell, she whispered. Yes, our lawyer said calmly. After forcing you out. The room felt smaller. Every sacrifice we had made was reduced to collateral. In his mind. That night my son called me. Not to apologize. To negotiate. Dad, he said. This has gone too far. I listened. He continued. We can settle this. You and Mom can stay in the house. We'll forget the rest. Forget. as if betrayal could be erased with a sentence. I asked him one question. Why did you do it? There was a long pause. Then he said, I deserve more. That was his truth. Not need. Not survival. More. I told him the trial would continue. He didn't yell. He sounded afraid. Over the next few weeks, his life began collapsing quietly. Not dramatically. Systematically. His employer placed him on leave. They cited reputational risk. Business partners backed away. Friends stopped calling. People don't like uncertainty. They don't like association with scandal, especially when court documents are public. My wife and I noticed something strange. The house felt peaceful again. Not happy, but steady. We started sleeping through the night. We stopped jumping at every sound. Fear had ruled us for months. Now it was gone. The next hearing was brutal. The judge reviewed the financial audit, line by line. He asked my son why he had claimed partial ownership without documentation. My son's lawyer tried to argue intent. The judge stopped him. Intent does not override legality. Then he turned to my son. Did you believe your parents would be too ashamed to fight back? The question hung in the air. My son didn't answer. He didn't have to. His silence said everything. The judge made another ruling. This one permanent. We were declared the sole legal owners of the house. Any future claim by my son was dismissed with prejudice. That meant forever. But the judge wasn't finished. He addressed my son directly. You abused trust. You abused process. And you attempted to exploit the people who gave you life. His voice was firm. You will face consequences. He referred the financial misrepresentation to further review. Not criminal yet, but close. Outside the courtroom, my son finally broke. He cried. Not quiet tears. Loud, shaking sobs. People stared. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt clarity. This wasn't revenge. This was accountability. Later that evening, his wife called my wife. She begged. She said they were losing everything. She asked us to withdraw complaints, to make it stop. My wife listened. Then she said something that surprised even me. You had every chance to choose kindness. And she hung up. Weeks passed. The wedding photos disappeared from social media. Their house went up for sale. Quietly. Friends stopped commenting. The perfect image faded. One afternoon, a certified letter arrived. My son was offering a settlement. He would renounce all claims, publicly acknowledge wrongdoing, pay damages. In exchange, we would stop cooperating with further investigation. Our lawyer read it carefully. She looked at us and said, "This is fear talking." We declined. Not because we wanted to hurt him, but because truth shouldn't be negotiated away. Then something unexpected happened. A younger couple down the street knocked on our door. They had been watching everything unfold. They told us they had been inspired. Inspired, they said. We saw how you stood up, without becoming bitter. I didn't know what to say. I had never felt strong. Just tired. The final pre-trial conference was scheduled. By then, my son looked older, thinner. He avoided eye contact. The judge reviewed everything one last time. Then he asked us if we wished to pursue damages. My wife squeezed my hand. This was the moment. We could take more. Money. Punishment. I stood up. I said, "We don't want revenge." The courtroom was silent. I continued, "We want acknowledgement and protection." The judge nodded slowly. He ruled in our favor. Again. He issued a permanent restraining order. preventing any harassment. He ordered restitution for legal costs, and he closed the case. Just like that. When we walked out, the air felt lighter. Not victorious. Free. But the story wasn't over. Because endings aren't always neat. A month later, my son showed up at the house. Unannounced. He stood on the porch. Like a stranger. He looked at the door. As if it might reject him. I opened it. He didn't come in. He said, "I don't know who I am anymore." I believed him. He asked if we could talk. I told him something I never thought I would say. "Not today." He nodded and left. As I watched him walk away, I realized something important. Winning in court doesn't heal everything, but it does something powerful. It restores dignity. And dignity, once reclaimed, changes how you see yourself forever. What I didn't know then was that the final chapter of this story would bring a lesson neither of us expected. Because the consequences of betrayal don't end with a ruling, they echo. And what happened next would finally answer whether family bonds can survive the truth. The house was quiet again. Not the heavy silence of fear. Not the tension-filled quiet of waiting. Just calm. The kind that settles in after a long storm finally passes. My wife started gardening again. Small things at first. New flowers near the porch. Fresh soil in old pots. I fixed the fence I had ignored for years. Painted the mailbox. Repaired a loose step. We weren't trying to erase the past. We were reclaiming the present. People assume that once a court case ends, everything suddenly feels better. It doesn't. Victory doesn't come with applause. It comes with exhaustion. Some nights, I still woke up, thinking I heard footsteps on the porch. Some mornings, my wife still paused before answering the phone. Trust doesn't return on a schedule. It rebuilds slowly, brick by brick. One afternoon, a letter arrived. Not certified. No legal stamp. Just handwriting. I recognized it immediately. My son. I didn't open it right away. I let it sit on the table. For 2 days. Not because I was angry. Because I was afraid of what it might stir up. On the 3rd day, I opened it. It wasn't long. No excuses. No legal language. Just words. He wrote that he had lost everything he thought mattered. His job. His image. His certainty. He wrote that standing alone had shown him who he had become. He didn't ask for the house. He didn't ask for money. He asked for time. "I don't expect forgiveness," he wrote. "I just want to understand if I'm still your son." I folded the letter carefully. My wife read it later that evening. She didn't cry. She just nodded slowly. That night, we talked longer than we had in months. About boundaries. About mistakes. About how love doesn't mean surrender. We didn't decide anything. And that was okay. A week later, we saw him again. Not at the house. At a small diner across town. Neutral ground. He arrived early. Sat with his hands folded. He looked thinner. Older. When we sat down, he stood up. He didn't hug us. He said, "I'm sorry." Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just honestly. He didn't blame his wife. He didn't blame stress. He blamed himself. He admitted he thought power meant control. That independence meant dominance. He said he confused generosity with weakness. I listened. I didn't interrupt. When he finished, I spoke. I told him something he clearly didn't expect. "I never needed you to succeed, to feel proud." He looked at me, confused. I continued, "I needed you to be decent." That's when he broke. Not theatrically. Quietly. The kind of tears that come from understanding loss. Too late. We didn't reconcile that day. But we started something new. Honesty. Months passed. He respected distance. He didn't push. He didn't ask. That mattered. Slowly, cautiously, we allowed conversation again. Short calls. Occasional meals. Always with boundaries. Trust doesn't come back because someone says sorry. It comes back when behavior changes. And his did. As for the house, we made a decision. We updated our will. Clear. Unambiguous. No assumptions. No pressure. Not out of spite. Out of wisdom. We learned that love needs structure. Without it, it collapses under entitlement. One evening, my wife asked me something. If this had ended differently, she said, would you have fought? I thought about it. Then I answered honestly. Yes. Because standing up was never about the house. It was about dignity. About refusing to disappear quietly. Just because someone else decided. We were no longer useful. A year later, our son visited the house again. Invited. He stood in the doorway. Like someone entering a memory. He didn't comment on changes. He didn't ask questions. He just looked around. At the walls. At the photos. At the life he once tried to erase. Before leaving, he said something I will never forget. I didn't lose the house, he said. I lost myself. And maybe that was the real cost. Today, life is quieter. Not perfect. But honest. We don't pretend. This never happened. We don't rewrite history. We live with it. Because pretending is what caused the damage. In the first place. If there's one thing I want you to take from this story, it's this. Love does not mean letting yourself be destroyed. Being a parent does not mean surrendering your rights. And standing up for yourself does not mean you failed. Sometimes, it means you finally showed your child what strength really looks like. If this story resonated with you, share where you're listening from. And if you've ever had to stand up to someone you loved, to protect your dignity, know this. You are not cruel. You are not selfish. You are human. And sometimes, the bravest thing a parent can do is refuse to disappear.